Alright, guys, so Europe is in big trouble once again because of what the US just did. The entire continent could face yet another energy crisis. Now, check your calendar, guys. We are in November, which means winter is coming really soon. The demand for power is going to skyrocket. Now, we've heard many times from von der Leyen that everything is fine. Europe's gas storage is full. Member states are all prepared for winter and there won't be any energy shortage. But is that really the case? Unlike the previous 2 years, winter for Europe is coming in cold, and as a result, their gas stockpiles are in serious trouble. Falling temperatures are increasing the demand for heating, and a wind drought is happening, so gas stockpiles are dropping fast. Wind energy is unreliable, and the EU is back to using more fossil fuels. Gas storage levels are being depleted faster than usual. It's a full percentage point lower than a 5-year average. This doesn't sound like much, but the trajectory isn't good, especially when winter isn't even here yet. When snow falls in December, Europe could be thrown back into an energy crisis. Now, you could say that it doesn't really matter. Europe could always refill their gas reserves next year, but there's no guarantee prices will be stable. It's a big gamble that could drive the EU further into debt and destroy their industries. Germany, for example, has cut away their power subsidies. So if prices go up, their industries will have to foot the bill. And let's consider the state of German manufacturing. This is a very terrible idea. The situation is very bleak. Gas prices in summer are higher than ever before. The EU will be paying over 4 euros more per megawatt hour to refuel their inventories. The flow of Russian gas is unstable thanks to Western sanctions. LNG from the US is also facing delays, so the governments have to procure more expensive gas next summer. Someone has to pay the cost at the end of the day. Europe can't raise taxes any higher without collapsing the consumer. And you want to ask companies to pay? That's going to be unthinkable. So this will have to come from debt. But the situation, once again, yes, is going to get worse. Europe's luck this winter is about to run out, and it's thanks to US sanctions. And you can't make this stuff up. The US government has officially sanctioned Gazprombank. The plan is to squeeze Russian gas revenues and deplete Putin's war chest. But don't get this twisted. The ultimate victim of this economic punishment will be the EU. These sanctions threaten to cut away vital gas flows that Europe still buys. This might come as a shock to some, but the EU still buys a lot of Russian gas. Let's recall what von der Leyen said back in Davos.
A year ago, Europe had a massive dependency on Russian fossil fuels built over decades. This made us vulnerable to supply squeezes, price hikes, and of course vulnerable to Putin's market manipulation. In less than a year, Europe has overcome this dangerous dependency. We have replaced 80% of Russian pipeline gas.
So the EU replaced 80% of pipeline gas, but what she didn't mention is how Europe is still buying Russian gas through proxies. Not only that, the bloc also actively buys a ton of Russian LNG in the market, and the numbers are still very significant. In Q3 this year, the EU imported over 13 billion cubic meters of Russian gas. That's even more volume than US LNG. But most importantly, this is a source of cheap energy. Now that the US has sanctioned Gazprombank, it's going to be near impossible for the EU to pay for Russian gas. There will be supply that has to come from elsewhere, which will drive costs up. Remember the arrangement Europe has with Russia. Putin has demanded that the EU pay for gas using rubles, and this payment has to go through Gazprombank. Now that the Americans have sanctioned the bank, how is Europe going to buy Russian gas? And are they going to reroute payments through China? Are they going to deliver physical gold for it? So you can kind of see how crazy this situation has become. Hungary is obviously frustrated with this. Orban still buys a lot of pipe gas from Russia. The foreign minister calls this move an attack on the country's sovereignty. It's one big complete mess. But the EU has to comply. Let's understand how US sanctions work. By punishing Gazprombank, Washington has cut it away from the SWIFT network. And this makes it impossible for the world to trade with the bank, and the punishment isn't just restricted to US banks and companies, it extends to the whole world. Any financial institution doing business with Gazprombank could get sanctioned by the US government itself. So if a German or French bank decides to process payments with Gazprombank, they could get cut out of the SWIFT system as well. That is the long arm of US sanctions. It applies to all G7 countries and the world at large. And if we look at the state of Europe today, they have no choice but to comply. And this is actually a master stroke by the United States. It's a genius move. I gotta clap for them. By banning the world from transacting with Gazprom, the US is forcing Europe to get their gas supplies from other places. And chances are it's gonna come from US companies. And let's not forget who's coming back into office in 2025. Trump is pro fossil fuels. He wants to unleash American energy, and this means boosting the production of oil and gas. What do you need when you plan to produce more gas? You want high paying customers. You want to sell the same commodity at a higher price, and there's no better customer than the EU. It's important we realize that energy is now becoming a tool of diplomacy. The US wants to sell more gas, and the ultimate bargaining chip is trade tariffs. Europe needs to sell more to the US market. 2 weeks ago, von der Leyen herself confirmed that the EU is thinking of switching suppliers to swap Russian supply for US LNG. And with the sanctions on Gazprombank, this makes the case for American gas even more compelling.
Secondly, discuss about common interests, and there are common interests that we have. So, and then go into negotiations. Common interests are, for example, this is one topic that we touched upon. I would not say discussed, but we touched upon yesterday. It's the whole topic of LNG. We still get a lot of LNG via Russia, from Russia. And why not replace it by American LNG, which is cheaper for us and brings down our energy prices, but is something where we can get into a discussion, also what our trade deficit is concerned. So engage, look at common interest, and then negotiate.
And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop when it comes to buying bullion. Their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first gold purchase, Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Whether it's 1 ounce or 1 kilo, this is the reputable dealer you are looking for. So take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code SeanFu. Start your gold stacking journey today. So the EU is thinking of buying US LNG in order to avoid Trump's tariffs. But if you think about it, how is that even a benefit? Even if it works, it could still be a net negative. Trump, we know he wants to slap a 10% tariff on global exports. Even if the EU avoids that, US LNG is much more expensive than Russian supply. This in turn will drive up the cost of manufacturing, so it's quite counterproductive if you think about it rationally. Buying US LNG makes you more dependent on a single source as well, plus it might not even be good for your industries. Since March this year, EU gas prices have been rebounding hard. It has gone from a low of 23 euros to nearly 50, so we are looking at over a 100% increase. This is from the current supply situation. The Gazprom ban just makes the situation worse. Now, Europe's energy supply is in crisis mode. For the US, this is good for the economy. Now, is this all coordinated? I have no idea. But if I was the US, this would be a gift from heaven itself. The sanctions on Gazprombank shows you how much power the US still has. The commodity markets are still linked closely to the Western financial system. But let's talk about the other beneficiary. If Russian gas gets sanctioned away, obviously Putin needs to sell it to a new buyer. Russian LNG will flood to other markets and drive prices down. And here's how ridiculous the situation is. 68% of Russian LNG goes to Europe, and that's over 17 million tons in 2023. Only 27% goes to Asian countries like Japan. Now that Europe can't pay for Russian LNG, more supply will flood Asia and drive prices down. This is good for Asian economies, but terrible for Europe. But the biggest winner would be China. They will enjoy even lower production costs. EV and chip production are going to become even more affordable. The Russia-China gas pipeline has just been completed 7 months ahead of schedule. Gas from Siberia is going to power the city of Shanghai by the end of the year. It's a 5,000-kilometer gas route that cuts through China's northern borders. China, which is the world's factory, is about to get even cheaper energy than before. The sanctions will just drive prices down for them, lowering input costs. This is bad news for Europe, which wants to tariff China. Now they are forced to produce more expensive goods while costs in China keeps going down. Best case scenario, EU consumers pay more for stuff. Worst case scenario, Europe loses all their global customers to China. How is this a win for EU industries? But imagine an alternative scenario. It's crazy, but things are really insane. This might happen. Europe gets 15% of their gas supply from Russia today. If the majority gets diverted to China, Beijing now has a ton of excess gas. So it would be highly possible for Chinese suppliers to redirect flows to Europe and charge them a higher price. So Russia sells a cargo at $100 to China. Chinese companies could mark up their excess supply at 130 or 150 to Europe. It's essentially what India is doing with their imports of Russian oil. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and frankly, the EU is running out of options, and maybe it's time to fire back all those nuclear plants. It's very unlikely that Trump will reverse the sanctions on Gazprom. The ban helps US energy companies, and Trump has always hated the idea of Europe buying Russian LNG.
Reliance on a single foreign supplier can leave a nation vulnerable to extortion and intimidation. Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers.
It's clear that Trump hates Russian gas. He wants Europe to buy American LNG. Don't expect him to reverse the sanctions. It'll probably be indefinite until we get some sort of peace settlement. So the EU paying for Russian gas is going to get a whole lot more difficult, if not impossible. What's more interesting is how countries can now see the real threat, which is the risk of relying on just one financial system. And this is going to accelerate new payment rails. More and more countries will demand alternatives. Maybe China will develop one. Maybe BRICS will build their own. But this move by the US isn't a smart one. It looks strategic on the surface, but it's going to backfire down the road. Weaponizing the financial system just isn't a good idea. But let me know what you think. Can Europe ever pay for Russian gas again? And who ultimately wins from this? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.